As the Prophet Muhammad said, "Give charity without delay, for it stands in the way of calamity." It's a reminder from our Prophet, giving not only changes lives, it also protects us from mishaps. When we give generously, we receive blessings in return. It's not about the size of your donation, it's about the consistency of your generosity. Even your small contribution can make a big difference in people's lives. Visit umrrelief.org today and join us on our journey to changing lives.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our iTVusa show, Balancing Deen and Dunya. My name is Dr. Suzy Ismail and I'm delighted to have you join us on our show again, where we get to interview inspirational individuals, people who are really trailblazing their way for the Muslim American community. Thank you to UMR for sponsoring our show, and thank you to our viewers and our guests for being a part of this show. Today, our guest is Brother Lu'ay Abdul Qadir. Brother Lu'ay is currently the elementary school principal at Al Ma'mur School in New York. He graduated from Brooklyn College with a bachelor's in English and management. He also has a certification from Cambridge University and a master's from Queen's College in the field of education. He's been a part of Al Ma'mur School for about 7 years now. And today he's going to tell us a little bit more about his journey and his experiences in this position. So welcome, Brother Lu'ay.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair for having me. Thank you so much.
We're happy to have you on the show. Brother Lu'ay, we often have different educators, coming on the show, telling us a little bit about their journeys, what led them into the field, speaking quite a bit about the investment in our youth. I'd love to hear your story. What is it that brought you into this position of being an educator at Al Ma'mur?
So my story is very different from others. My story is quite unique. In college, I guess I came to find Islam. When I was throughout my life, I've always been taught Islam growing up, but I think every one of us, we have that moment where it just clicks with us, it registers with us. And it was around college, around that time, that it registered with me. And I decided at the time that I wanted to, as I was learning, I really wanted to, I just developed an attachment to Mecca and Medina, and I just decided to myself, I want to go live there. How do I live there? One of the easiest ways is to get into education. That was honestly my goal. As time went on, I pursued my education in education. And as time went on, my plans just changed, and I decided that one way or another, I want to work in an Islamic environment. So I started working over here, and I very, very quickly started to develop a strong attachment towards the students, towards the atmosphere, the environment. And as time went on, I started as a teacher. For the first 2 years of my career, I was a teacher. 2 years in the school, I was a teacher. And then the next 4 years or so, 3 years, I was assistant principal. And here I am now as elementary director or elementary principal.
Okay. So mashallah, I think, it started out with the intention of, seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah, it sounds like. And, in that path, in that journey, you found yourself, also imparting knowledge, in an Islamic school, again, for the sake of Allah. What is it that pulls you towards Islamic schools in particular? What is it that you enjoy in teaching at Ma'mur or being a leader at Ma'mur?
There's a lot of things I can speak about, but more than anything, I think it's such a blessing to live live in a non-Muslim land, live in a non-Muslim country, and be able to practice Islam and be surrounded by an Islamic environment. That is invaluable. I can't even begin to express just how significant that is. And then working in the school, you come to develop a connection with the community, students, teachers, parents, so on and so forth. And every Islamic school tends to be pretty tight-knit. That's just how it is. And it feels much more like a community. See, in public schools, you have people moving, and when they move, their zone school changes. So people are constantly coming in, constantly leaving. But in such an environment over here, even when people move, they stay with the school. And alhamdulillah, there's a lot of parents I've known for years now, a lot of teachers I've known for years now, students I've seen grow up. It's just, I don't know, it feels like a second home almost.
SubhanAllah, I think it's a good way of describing it. You know, I taught at an Islamic school for about 12 years, so I know that atmosphere, that connection of being there with parents and children. But I also know that there are challenges of, you know, being a part of an Islamic school. And one of the challenges that we often hear from administrators, teachers, those who are involved, are financial challenges. That, you know, why would you want to be teaching in an Islamic school when you could be earning, you know, double that salary somewhere else? Or, you know, how do you kind of work through that in terms of the position, career-wise?
So it's there is no easy answer to this, and it's as you said, there's a million and one problems in every school, and Islamic schools are no different. And there is no easy way around it. But I think anybody who comes to an Islamic school, you have to come here, and there is no sugarcoating this issue. We tend to look for the community support in this area because everybody understands the dilemma and the difficulty, and so we try to get as much support as we can in this area. But there's only so much that can be done. Um, Ultimately, though, teachers who end up working in Islamic schools, they can end up coming from all different backgrounds. They make their choices for all different reasons, and it's something that you would have to decide for yourself if this is the right fit for you, the right choice for you. Most people who end up working here, they end up consciously choosing an Islamic environment over a public school environment, a non-Islamic environment, for a variety of reasons. Because Islamic schools are just much um, better and easier to teach in. Public schools come with all sorts of difficulties as well. Um, Along with that, you're in an Islamic environment. Along with that, you're in a communal environment. Um, and so, you know, I've had numerous teachers come to me and tell me that they started in public school or they taught in different locations, and then they come over here. They feel an amazing connection with the community, alhamdulillah, an amazing connection with the students, and they see barakah in their wealth. Yani they're doing it for the sake of Allah, and they see that although they might be receiving less, that their wealth is just stretched in ways that they never anticipated. I had actually had a brother here just yesterday telling me these exact words. So
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah, that's beautiful. Alhamdulillah. I think there is a lot of truth in that. You know, there are people who make, you know, millions of dollars and feel like, you know, they can't keep up and they're in debt and things like of that sort. And there's people who make, you know, just enough, you know, to get by. And there's more barakah in that, SubhanAllah. So we mentioned, you know, one of the problems for administrators, some of the difficulties that we're starting to see more and more of, whether it's in Islamic schools and public schools, you know, in any type of school, is, you know, youth who are indicating signs of mental health struggles, difficulties with anxiety, depression, even suicide ideation in kids that are as young as 9, 10 years old. And I know as someone who leads the elementary school, you're also not immune to seeing these cases, I'm sure. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what does the mental health outlook look like for elementary school students, particularly in an Islamic school?
So this is a very difficult subject, and it's difficult for a variety of reasons. But one of the most common reasons why it's difficult is because, given the fact that everyone is coming from an Islamic background, unfortunately, the common response in an Islamic community tends to be one of miseducation. It's, you know, people who have a strong Islamic background, unfortunately, when it comes to these kind of situations, they tend to think, and even they'll sometimes even say, yani, the reason why you're experiencing these things, or the reason why you're feeling the way you are, is because your iman is not strong enough. And there is some truth to that. Of course, there's some truth to that, no doubt about that. However, these are real problems, and these problems do have, they do have real dunya solutions. What I mean is, in the same way that we might get a cut in our hand, and we don't say just make dua. We say that you have to go maybe get a band-aid, do whatever. There's some things that you should be doing. In the same way that if somebody's struggling with some mental health, you know, they have their own difficulties with their mental health. Yes, you should be relying on Islam. Yes, you should be relying on Allah. In the same way that you rely on Allah and recognize that He has control over everything, and that if He wants to remove you from the situation, He can remove you from the situation. No doubt about any of that. But at the same time, there are dunya solutions that we should be exploring as well. And those dunya solutions come in the form of, number one, staff really just need to be trained in these areas. Teachers need to be told exactly what to look for. And alhamdulillah, all of our teachers are trained in essential mental health indicators, right? Beyond that, there also needs to be a conversation with parents about what is normal, what's not normal, and how to handle certain situations. Counselors Unfortunately, I say unfortunately, they are very important. I say unfortunately only because they're often seen as not the most important, because the field is not the most understood within some Islamic communities. But alhamdulillah, I do want to say that I'm fairly well connected with other Islamic schools, and in my connections with other Islamic schools, I'm seeing that there's especially within the last 10 or 15 years or so, there's been a newfound push within the Islamic school community to handle these kind of things. I was just talking to a brother from a different school who's the assistant principal at a different school, and he told me that his school, despite the fact that they only have 300 students, has 3 counselors, which public schools tend to have 1 counselor per 500 students. That's the norm, whereas they have 1 per 100 students, which I thought that was amazing, mashallah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the more that we can emphasize the importance of providing that mental health support and that guidance and destigmatize the conversations around it, the more effective we'll be. One of the things that we've been seeing in particular with younger students, and particularly post-COVID, whether it was impacted by the pandemic, by the virtual education, hybrid education, or what exactly, but we're seeing just increased numbers of students at younger ages diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, being classified as being on the autism spectrum. What do you see in your school?
We don't see anything to that degree, alhamdulillah. And those are extremely difficult problems. Honestly, I struggle to think how difficult of a situation it would be for schools who are dealing with this. But alhamdulillah, I know that our school is not, and from what I understand from other Islamic schools, they're not dealing with mental health troubles to that extent. However, there's no doubt about it, there was a massive effect as a product of COVID and remote learning and so on and so forth. The entire experience impacted our kids in ways that I don't think anybody could have anticipated. And we're seeing challenges that I don't think schools have ever faced before. At our school, what we're dealing with more often than not is a strong attachment to social media in ways that we haven't seen before. I just think that a lot of students, especially when they were home, they were in front of their computer the whole time, even in their classes. Like, how can you really prevent that? They might be on social media on another tab or something along those lines. And so throughout that entire experience, because of the fact they weren't outdoors, because of the fact that they're seeing what they're seeing for an extended period of time, and just going through the entire ordeal, just you're 10 years old, 12 years old, nobody has seen a pandemic in a very, very long time, and suddenly you're going through this thing, and your parents they've never experienced something like this either. They have no idea how to handle this, and you're seeing the troubled faces. All of that has a heavy, heavy influence on children, and so we're seeing all sorts of difficulties come our way as a product of this. And as a result of all this, we've had to have a lot of conversations with students about conversations we never thought we would have, conversations with parents, and it goes without saying that parents never assumed or imagined that their children could be developing or struggling in the ways that they are. It's been a challenging time for sure. But I think the biggest step that Islamic schools and the Islamic community really do need to take more than anything else, and alhamdulillah, I feel that they are, it's just a recognition that this is a fact and problem, and our youth are struggling from this, even if they might fail to communicate, because they're so young that sometimes they don't know how to communicate what they're going through. If they fail to communicate what they're going through, even still, it's on us, it's our responsibility to identify the indicators and to respond accordingly.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things we're seeing definitely is the exposure to themes and, apps and things online that are really far beyond the age of the children who are being exposed to it. And I think the more we facilitate conversations with both parents and students, the more awareness that's created, the better the results will be, inshallah. Speaking of technology, one of the other topics that we see quite frequently today in the news and, definitely at the university level, high school level, but I'm wondering if we may start to incorporate it in the elementary level as well, is the influence of ChatGPT, of, online avenues. I know sometimes these kids are, smarter than their parents in terms of accessing answers to homework or are you seeing any concerns in terms of like an increase in using technology in ways that may lead to plagiarism or cheating, essentially?
Right. No, there's definitely that concern. I haven't seen it so much in the elementary department, but definitely early middle school, we're seeing this kind of stuff. Early middle school going on to high school, we see a lot of this. Or I shouldn't say we see a lot of this. We do see some of this. Alhamdulillah, I feel our students are wonderful. Really, our students are amazing. Alhamdulillah. Of course, if they have an assignment where they're really struggling with, yani we can be somewhat sympathetic. They shouldn't be using it, of course. But there have been cases that have come our way. And it's a difficult one. I think the major thing that schools are struggling with in this regard, there is no real solution. If a child wants to access ChatGPT, one way or another, they can get to it. If you try to, one avenue that I'm seeing some schools they are pursuing is issuing devices to students that have certain configurations so that the student can't access whatever the school doesn't want them to access. But then the child can just pick up a phone or pick up an iPad or something along those lines. So it's so hard to control. And I know that there's a push right now for, rather than schools pushing against this, to kind of accept it and adopt it within their curriculum, in the same way that the internet kind of led to a similar quote unquote tragedy, right? When the internet first came about, schools were all your students can just easily just go on any computer or device and get the answer. The same conversations were happening back then. And then when smartphones started to really emerge, they could just Google it on their phone, so on and so forth. And I think this push of incorporating ChatGPT and other softwares within the school, AI softwares within the school curriculum and whatnot, I think that is the correct approach. However, it's so early right now that nobody has a clear idea of how exactly you would do that. Everyone's searching for those answers, but it's one of those things that nobody has there's no perfect response to it, really.
Yeah. And I definitely see different attempts being made, whether it's like essays are being written in class now rather than take-home essays, where in that case, though, we're kind of losing the aspect of research and writing over long periods of time. So I think there's going to be some different innovative ways, I think, to approach these new technologies. And as the new technologies get smarter, I think we also have to get smarter as to how to work with them.
There's like different plagiarism tools as well to try to identify if it's from AI, but the AI is advancing so quickly that those plagiarism tools will eventually just get out of date and they won't be able to pick it up anymore. And this is something that's expected in the near future as well. So the only real solution is to just accept that it exists and accept that the students can access it. Now, what do we do? How do we incorporate it? Also, it's worth noting that these AI tools, when we look at them as a plagiarism enemy, yes, there is some truth to that, of course, but still, it's a tool that the child could use realistically in their lives, and an acknowledgement towards that needs to be present. Later in their lives, these tools can be very useful for them, and so it is worth teaching the students how to utilize them. But you want to take the good. Just how do you take the good without also taking the bad? That's the big challenge.
Yeah, finding the balance. Yeah. So one of the things that we've been seeing is within the past few years in particular, an increase in, parents' applications for their children to enroll in Islamic schools. And it's a bit of a move from what we were seeing a few years back, where a lot of parents were hesitant about Islamic schools because of the academics and whether or not their child would get into a good college. But what we're seeing, particularly in New York, New Jersey, California, a few of the other blue states that have rolled out gender-bread curricula that focuses on gender fluidity, gender nonconformity, that focuses on LGBTQIA+ types of identity pushes, and incorporating that very early on in curricula, beginning in kindergarten. We're seeing a lot of parents kind of flocking to Islamic schools. But we also know that our children in Islamic schools are not immune to being affected by, an agenda that is very widespread and that has kind of infiltrated everything from movies to kids' stories to things of that sort. As an Islamic school, how do you approach the topic of gender fluidity, LGBTQIA+, especially at a young age, while finding that balance also in terms of, state law and making sure that there isn't any essence of discrimination going on?
Right. So, first of all, like if parents are flocking towards Islamic schools, and you're absolutely right about that. This year, we've seen something that we've never seen before, which is our school roster is about 330 total. Of our 330 students, all of them are coming back next school year, with the exception of 8. And they're leaving for reasons that are beyond their control. I personally, in all my time in the school, I've never seen anything like that. Usually, we have something along the lines of 70 seats per school year, but maybe more than that, maybe 100 seats available, something like that, but not 8. I've never seen anything like that. And the reason why parents are flocking towards Islamic schools is actually not so clear. The common argument, or rather the common belief, is because of the fear of indoctrination of gender fluid ideologies and whatnot, right? That's the common belief that people have, that this is why everybody's flocking towards Islamic schools, but it's not. The reason, it seems like, from all the conversations that I've had with parents, conversations that I've had with principals at other Islamic schools, and even teachers, right? The reason seems to be that as a product of everything that happened, or everything that transpired after COVID, after every students were returning, teachers were returning, public schools were just so different. The entire experience was so different. The difficulties that students, all the challenges that we feared that students would come back with, they did come back with those and more. Parents basically are finding, it depends obviously on what district you're in, what locality you're in, but a lot of parents felt that the quality of education in public schools has really, really just gone down. And that there's just a lot of different, with the teacher shortage and everything like that, there's just a lot of problems that are going on. And they feel more comfortable, and they feel like in an Islamic education, or rather an education in an Islamic school, is just higher quality. That seems to be the more common belief in my conversations with family, in my conversations with others as well. And then regarding, conversations about gender fluidity and things along these lines, the only thing I can say to that is that there's the religious point of view, and we don't hide it, we don't sugarcoat it, which is that a lot of the concerns that are brought forward by these ideologies are concerning, and we don't sugarcoat that, we don't hide that. That said, it isn't fair to treat that as though we're saying that it's an extreme, or rather the common thing, like there's so much anger and frustration within the Islamic community towards these things. It's as if these things are kufr, like these things just take you out of Islam. They don't, right? They're problems. Yes, they are problems, but still, anybody who has strong beliefs in these areas, whatever the case may be, still Muslim. And we still treat them like Muslim. At the end of the day, what needs to be understood is the religion does have its point of view, and there's no sugarcoating it, there's no hiding from it. But at the same time, people have their freedom of choice, and that shouldn't be stripped away from them. If a person wants to choose whatever route they want to choose, they're free to do so. And that it really, and our responsibility is to not look down on them, to not treat them any different. We shouldn't be. That's really the most I can say about that subject.
Yeah. And I think, again, as we educate our community, as we educate our parents, as we create more awareness and understanding, the hope is that parents are also partners in the process of Islamic education, which isn't just about the academics, but it has the component of tarbiyah and adab and akhlaq and all of these elements combined, in addition to the memorization of the Quran, of course, the memorization of the hadith, and the application of it to life. So Speaking of, difficult topics, to approach children with in an academic setting in an Islamic school, we know that since October 7th, many of our children have, of course, been exposed to the violence, the genocide that is happening in Gaza, and maybe are hearing different things, whether, things from friends on their soccer team outside of school may not line up with, what they're hearing at home, or what they're seeing on the news on one channel is very different than on another channel. How does the school approach a topic like the genocide in Gaza, particularly for younger students who are very vulnerable and impressionable at that age?
So, to be clear about one thing, there is no confusion about this topic. There is no confusion about it anymore. When the topic first emerged in October, there was a lot of confusion. But ironically enough, there wasn't that much confusion when it came to the youth. They were confused as to why the media was saying what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Why were they confused about that? Particularly because in social media, the message was very different.
Yeah.
It's common knowledge, it's well known, that the message in social media was really just that this is a genocide. What's happening is atrocious and terrible. And on social media, kids, students, teenagers, even younger than teenagers, preteens, they're seeing videos of things that are happening there, uncensored. And they can't just walk away from that. And they compare that to the news, and they see that the message on the news is very different. And that's where there's this discrepancy. There was, at least originally in October. As of now, I think, and Allah knows best, but yes, the message in media might not be so, I guess, supportive towards Palestinians, towards Palestine and what's happening, towards the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and whatnot. But there's no doubt. I think there's, even within the international community, there's no doubt that what's happening over there is atrocious. There are horrible crimes being committed on a daily basis. And because of that, there is no, I feel at least, any confusion that students might have had only existed in the very beginning because they saw this discrepancy. They see all their parents, the entire Islamic community saying one thing, but then they turn on the TV and they see something else. But then they turn on social media and they see the same thing that's being echoed within the masajid, within the Islamic community. So yes, there was some confusion originally, but I don't think that confusion is present anymore, not among the youth, at least. What is disturbing to the youth and what is challenging are all the questions that this raises.
Mm-hmm.
And how can something like this happen in the modern world? How can people be murdered and their homes be stripped away from them in cold blood, really? And the entire international community is just watching.
Mm-hmm.
The entire world is just watching. Like, how can something like this happen? And it makes them start to feel all sorts of things, insecure even of themselves. And if this can happen in the real world, and how we thought that the international world would always just stand for justice, or the country that we're living in would always stand for justice, but then you see that they're not, right? It makes a person feel unsafe even. And so there was a lot of conversations that we've had as a product of all of this. We've had numerous guests come in. We had conversations, we had different presentations, we even had events about this stuff. And we coordinated with other Islamic schools, and we actually had a meeting with all principals in all Islamic schools in New York City, where we just shared ideas. These are different ways that we can tackle this issue, and each Islamic school took ideas and they implemented what they felt was best. We had a lot of really, really good ideas shared within that meeting, and it was very helpful. So there's been this whole issue is much more complex than given credit for, I suppose.
SubhanAllah, yeah. And I think that's, you hit on a very important point, that one of the assets or the attributes of attending an Islamic school is having more of a confirmation and affirmation of identity as a Muslim American, and having the tools in how to speak to that and how to speak of that in wider conversations. So in the last minute or two that we have together, there is a question that we like to ask all of our guests, which is related to the title of this program, which is, how do you, as a leader in Islamic education, as someone who is, responsible essentially for a large number of elementary school students every year, how do you find balance in terms of your deen and your dunya? How do you find that balance in practice and action in all aspects between deen and dunya?
I think the simplest way that I can answer it is don't view them as mutually exclusive. They should be one and the same. I mean, I'm working at an Islamic school. I'm working here by choice. Like if I wanted to, I can work elsewhere. This is my deen and this is my dunya, both one and the same. And you know, a lot of the conversations that we have within our administration, within our staff, you know, talking to teachers and whatnot, a lot of our conversations are rooted in this, that when we're here for the sake of Allah. And so when we come here, you know, recite some Quran, remind yourself why you're here, do some adhkar, and let that power you through the day.
Yeah, subhanAllah. And I think it's a beautiful way of looking at it, that they are intertwined together and that we should not be, you know, trying to seek balance as if they were separate, but that our deen and our dunya are intertwined. So Jazakallah khair, Brother Lu'ay, for joining our show. Ramadan Mubarak. I know we are more than halfway through the month. I hope that the remainder of the month, and particularly the last 10 nights that are almost upon us, are filled with nur and barakah for you, for your students, for the families, and the community that you serve. Thank you to all of our viewers who have joined us for today's episode. Our guest today was Lu'ay Abdul Qadir, who is the elementary school principal of Al Ma'mur School in New York City. Thank you once again to UMR for sponsoring our program and for iTVusa for producing it. I hope to see you all tomorrow, inshallah, on Balancing Deen and Dunya. Assalamu alaikum.